Shalom and welcome. Shalom and welcome to Congregation Lador Vador. I am Rabbi Stephen Moskowitz, and I am so pleased that you have joined us for this special occasion when we will dedicate Annie's Garden in memory of Annie Bleiberg, a longtime member of our synagogue community. I wish to acknowledge a number of people before I share some remembrances of Annie. First of all, I'm pleased to lead this dedication ceremony with our cantor, Talia Smilowitz, who will share the extraordinary gift of her voice to mark this milestone in our congregation's history. Our president, Brian Land, had every intention of being here this morning, but unfortunately, he just came down with COVID, so he sends his regrets. I know how pleased he is that we have added Annie's Garden to our landscape. We are also grateful to our Board of Trustees for their unwavering support. Our congregation's Enrichment Committee, chaired by Ginny Kunkin and Judy Tantliff, were instrumental in building this garden. They have been planning this beautiful garden for years. Suzanne Sepperson, a member of the committee and Annie's daughter, will share some remarks later in the program. All of the committee members deserve our thanks and praise. Thank you to Roz Blumenthal, Robin Charlo, Nomi Glazer, Marcia Glick, Judy Hirschon, Susan Holtzman, Eileen Lambden, and Bonnie Schnagel. And thank you to Stephen Holtzman, whose gardening expertise helped the committee to realize its vision. I would also like to acknowledge two guests whose presence helps to elevate this occasion: Josh Lafazin, a Nassau County legislator, and Andrea Bolander, the chair of the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. Annie was a longtime supporter of the center and shared her story with many of the memorial's visitors. I had the privilege of serving as Annie's rabbi for almost 18 years. It was one of my greatest honors that she chose to call me rabbi. Hearing someone who has lived through the history that I only study and teach feels especially weighty. And sometimes when I'm reading and learning about the Shoah, I can still hear Annie's voice in my ears. I can still hear the words she would offer to our students when she came every year to our sixth grade class to speak about how she survived the Holocaust. I recall how she would tell them how her life was similar to theirs before the Nazis invaded her native Poland. I remember many things, but a few notes from her story are deserving of mention. She told the students how when she and her family were crammed into a train car heading for a death camp, her father managed to pry open the small window with the tools he had smuggled onto the train. Men and boys squeezed through the opening and jumped first, and then it was the women's and girls' turn. The last boy became scared, and so Annie, who was to be the first girl, jumped in his stead, and then he after her. By then, the guards on top of the train discovered what they were doing and shot and killed the boy when he jumped. Annie's last memories of her mother and sister who were murdered in that death camp is saying goodbye to her sister in that cramped train car and the feeling of her mother's hands pushing her from behind to help her squeeze through the window. She never saw them again. Only she and her father managed to survive. Still, even after her many attempts to avoid capture, the Nazis did manage to find her when a former classmate identified her as a Jew. And yet she would emphasize to the students, not that neighbor who turned her in, but all the other people who hid her or gave her a morsel of food or offered her a warm bath when she was on the run. There were good people, she would say, who helped her survive. She spent nearly 1.5 years in concentration camps, and she would try to convey to our students how terrible the experience of the camps was. She was always hungry. She became weak and emaciated. And then she would often tell the students how she and 3 other girls would share their daily rations. They would use one of their tea rations, or what she would tell them was like dirty water, to color their cheeks. That way they would not look as pale as they actually were. And looking healthier meant one more day of life. And then she would often point her finger and say, "Living is always worth it. No matter how bad things seem, life is precious." And then she would conclude her story by saying, "Am Yisrael Chai," the people of Israel lives. We would then give the students an opportunity to talk about what they heard and to come up to Annie and ask her questions one-on-one. And they would often want to see her number up close, 38330. And some would want to touch her arm and feel the tattoo, and she would let them. She never covered her number up. She wanted the world to see it. Her arm served as testimony against the Nazis and the evil they perpetrated, but also, of course, as witness to her survival. And I would often drive her home after the Hebrew school concluded, and in the car, she would talk about what she had just shared. And I had this sense that telling her story was both simultaneously invigorating and exhausting. She would often say, "You know, Rabbi, I leave out some of the details when talking to such young students." And I remember thinking, there were worse moments than jumping off a moving train on a snowy winter night. There were worse moments than drinking dirty water tea and eating half a slice of bread every day. And on one occasion, she told me the following: "We used to have to squat to go to the bathroom at the edge of these latrine pits. And sometimes people were so weak they fell in and drowned in those pits. And on other occasions, the Nazi guards would push them into those pits, and they would drown. And even going to the bathroom was dangerous. In the camps, even the most mundane and basic of human things could mean death. The Nazis robbed Jews of their humanity. And I cannot explain why this is the memory I can never forget. Perhaps it was because I had this feeling that Annie needed to share it and speaking it out loud, but she also felt she could not tell such a horror to our young students. She wanted them to remain hopeful. Her goal when telling our students was to instill hope. And even in the midst of sharing the terrors she experienced, she wanted to protect our children and our students. She did not want them only to see anti-Semitism and death. She wanted them to see survival and life. And Annie did survive. She married and had a daughter. She celebrated the B'nai Mitzvah of grandchildren as well as weddings. She was present for the birth of great-grandchildren. And she wanted our students to remember the Nazi evils, but also see survival and hope. And that, of course, is the point of our garden, so aptly named Annie's Garden. In the winter, there will be barren trees and bushes and its cold stone benches. And I will then imagine her tumbling in the snowbank when Annie tried to evade her Nazi tormentors. And then every year, at around this time, its bushes will start filling with color, and its flowers will start blooming. And I will recall her concluding message of hope and her words, "Life is always worth it. Am Yisrael Chai."